This Sixers season was an absolute failure from every single angle, as injury concerns, locker room drama, and overall underperformance prevented this team from ever getting off the ground. But it did seem to weigh on one particular player a little bit more than the others, as Tyrese Maxey no longer possessed the smile that was once plastered to his face every single second he was on the floor. I do want to talk a little bit about Tyrese Maxey, what this season means for him, how much it weighed for him, and how he said just as such in his post-game press conference. So to dive into exactly what he said following the season is Maxey said, quote, "I think the biggest thing for me, man, and this is the first time I've ever been through something like this," Maxey said after the season. "Honestly, I can't sit here and say I was prepared for this moment. I've never prepared for a moment like this, but my biggest thing is trying to keep everyone positive. At the end of the day, it does suck." This was the first time Maxey had gone through a season like this one. He had made the playoffs in each of his first 4 seasons in the league and experienced a lot of success from the jump, so this was a tough season for him, but he still had to do his job and keep the Sixers focused on basketball. Quote, "I'm not gonna sit here and tell y'all, oh man, I'm happy, I'm smiling. I go home and I smile because we go home early. But the biggest thing is we get to play basketball for a living. And we have to really acknowledge that and be thankful for that," Maxey explained. "Myself, I took a lot of criticism this year, and I appreciate it from everybody, and all that it's going to do for me is make me better. I think I go have stuff to work on and get better at that, and I think everybody should do that as well." So not as vulnerable as kind of I think is the reality here. And when you think about it from Maxey's perspective, not only has he never been on a losing team in the NBA, this man has never been on a losing team in his life. That you look through his AAU records, his high school records, that a team that Tyrese Maxey was on is a winning basketball team. But that was not the case last year. Now, for Maxey specifically here, he is not the guy that this falls on. I'm not here to criticize Maxey for being a reason why the train came off the tracks last year. But my fear is there is a world where he becomes an effect to that. And why do I say that exactly? Is there's so much committed and tied up in Joel Embiid, in Paul George, that it is Tyrese Maxey's time to step to the limelight. And if that does not happen, I do believe there will be outside factors that make it clear. And with those specific outside factors being Rich Paul. Now, I'm not saying that right now we should worry about Tyrese Maxey requesting a trade. But what I am saying is Rich Paul essentially controls the NBA. That you can make a pretty strong case that that is the most powerful man in basketball, Adam Silver included in that. That Rich Paul is the player pulling the strings, and we have seen that firsthand here in Philadelphia. Now, there are general managers that will meet his match and call his bluff, with Daryl Morey being right in that same mix. Let's not forget that I personally think it is bad for the sport, the power that Rich Paul has. And when speaking about the athletes that he represents, we are talking the LeBron James, the Anthony Davis, the Draymond Greens, Zach LaVine, Fred VanVleet, De'Aaron Fox, Darius Garland, DeJounte Murray, Tyrese Maxey, and mind you, several of these names on this list have hopped to quite a few teams as recently as this year. We saw Zach LaVine traded this year. We saw De'Aaron Fox traded this year, and very quickly, I might add with that, DeJounte Murray traded at the beginning of the season. The point being here that Rich Paul knows how to use his chips and is not afraid to do it. When think about how that played out here in Philadelphia, think about exactly the Ben Simmons situation. Now, knowing what we know now, obviously we can view that situation in a slightly different light. But thinking back to that time frame, shortly after Ben Simmons absolutely imploded at the hands of the Atlanta Hawks and he requested a trade. He held out from training camp. And what did he do from a Sixers perspective here? He canceled Tyrese Maxey's charity events in Philadelphia. That was a Rich Paul move. I know that firsthand. I know that to be fact. I personally had an issue with that because it should be noted that the agent works for the player, not the other way around. And what offended me in that particular situation, as he was using at that time a lower leverage player in Tyrese Maxey to get a bigger ticket client, Ben Simmons, to his desired destination. Well, the turntables have shifted, and Tyrese Maxey is certainly a big ticket client. And if do not just speak that in terms of his play, we can speak that in terms of his contract. As shortly before the season, that Tyrese Maxey signed a $35 million deal for this year. Well, a in total 5-year contract, $203 million, a max contract, the first likely of a couple in his career. $35 million that he was paid this season. $37.9 million next year, $40.7 million in 26-27, $43.5 million in 27-28, $46.3 million in 28-29 before he hits the undrafted free agent. Now, let's think back to when this contract was signed. There was some very calculated efforts by Daryl Morey to even make this happen. I'm not saying to convince Tyrese Maxey to sign. He expressed that he wanted to stay in Philadelphia. There was no risk in rocking the boat, that he was happy exactly where he was at this current point. But what had to be done was the particular order of operations to make sure you could get through these salary cap intricacies. That Paul George had to touch pen to paper before Tyrese Maxey touched his. Now, what did that mean in a particular limelight there? There could have been a world where Tyrese Maxey walked out, seeked out different offers, and explored the open market. Now, that didn't make much sense from an overall contract perspective here. That kind of the theme in the NBA that we've seen quite a bit lately is there's rewards for staying with the team that drafted you. You can get a higher percentage of how much you can directly make, and guys would rather sign on, get that money, and then see where, ultimately who's cashing those checks at the end of the deal here. For Tyrese specifically, let's also flash back to when this deal was signed and how much the Sixers bent over backwards to make sure they made Tyrese Maxey's importance clear. We're talking about Dr. J walking him through, handing him the keys to this organization, essentially. We're talking about a whole presentation, the Maxey Museum being built. And I don't mean this as a slight whatsoever. I think it is awesome that the Sixers did that. I think you should show your appreciation, his importance, his value to the franchise beyond just through monetary figures here. But now, that was all a long time ago at this point. The season went as bad as anyone could have possibly guessed here. Is there a world where we're back next year, where we flip the switch, Joel's back, Paul George, resurgence? Maybe, but are we living in that one? I sure hope so, but I can't. If I'm a betting man right now, I can't cash my chips all in the middle and believe that will absolutely with 100% certainty happen. Now, Tyrese has acknowledged as such as well, and he was asked particularly about Joel Embiid this season, also following the year, and said, quote, on Joel, he just couldn't be himself. You could tell. I've seen him do so many spectacular things, and I gave him the ball a couple times in moments where I think that he will do something, and he just couldn't. He was limited. Hopefully that surgery went well, and he gets back to the Joel Embiid that we know and love. Now, by all accounts here, it's been a pretty strong relationship between Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. That there's been this pretty cool little brother, big brother dynamic that has kind of developed throughout their years together at this point. But it also is not coincidental that we're getting leaks in the locker room this year of Tyrese Maxey challenging Joel Embiid, and Joel basically calling whoever leaked that a POS, and that was the response from Joel. Now, you can certainly make the case that that essentially proves the point that Tyrese Maxey was pointing out, and I'm not going to fight with that either. But I also kind of challenge for Tyrese specifically, I'm appreciative that you did that. That was the move, and you've earned sort of the wherewithal to be able to even have that voice. A guy, and whenever we talk about bringing in veteran leadership and all these type of things, you bring in a vet that hasn't been here. PJ Tucker can't walk in that locker room and say, Joel, what the heck, man? Eric Gordon can't step up and say, Joel, what's your deal, man? It has to be a guy that's been through the trenches, gone to war with them, gone to battle, been through the heartbreaks, and that is why Tyrese was the guy. But when looking at this in its entirety, there is a world where this all blows up. And what the Sixers cannot allow to happen is for Tyrese Maxey to be caught in the shrapnel. It has to be clear moving forward that Tyrese Maxey can be the face of this franchise. He can be the number one guy if things play out the correct way, and I'm certainly not betting against him reaching those heights. I have a tough time even grading last season for Tyrese Maxey from a pure basketball perspective. A really unique season in which he struggled early on, then he went through about a midseason stretch and when he was on an absolute tear, a clear-cut all-star guard, one of the best guards in the NBA. He was incredible. And then there was a lull again. And obviously, he dealt with some injuries as well, particularly down that second half of the season and ultimately being shut down for the year, and a variety of injuries that he dealt with as well, a bunch of weird things that he kind of tried to battle through. I give him props for competing and trying to be on the floor as much as possible, but his importance to this organization needs to be made clear this offseason. They cannot risk losing Tyrese Maxey under any circumstance. If this entirely blows up, that Joel Embiid can't play again, that Paul George wants out, he's sick of the Philadelphia experience, they don't keep their draft pick, all that must still be put to the side and be prioritized on keeping Tyrese Maxey happy and maintaining his place in the Sixers franchise. We're not at the spot where we should have to worry about Tyrese requesting a trade yet, but we cannot get to where that is a serious spot, as he does have the means, the people behind him, and, the talent to ultimately command that being a possibility here. I don't want to put that in the universe anything beyond that, but that is something that I think Sixers fans should be aware of, and hopefully Tyrese Maxey is ready to buckle up and raise this team back up next season. It is not his fault why things went off the rail this year by any means whatsoever. I give Tyrese a lot of props for battling through and doing as much as he can, but everything from start to finish, from top to bottom, has to be better for this organization next year, and they cannot risk whatsoever that changing for Tyrese Maxey's future outlook. Let me know what you guys think in the comments on that overall. Do you have any concern over that? Because in all reality here, we have to acknowledge the personality, the smiley Tyrese Maxey did not exist last year, and I do think that it was a little more than just losing games. But drop your thoughts below. Do want to hear from you guys in the comments. As always, make sure you drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.